Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here today. I want to first give a warm welcome to everybody who has taken their time to come and be at our public outreach meeting today. My name is Ben Griffin. I am the Street Maintenance Division Manager here for the City of Raleigh. I work with the Raleigh Department of Transportation. And the public outreach meeting that we are having today concerns some work that we are doing to update our ADA transition plan, specifically as it relates to public right-of-way infrastructure. So things like sidewalks, curb ramps, audible pedestrian signals, crosswalks, things of that nature, and how we as the City of Raleigh can continue to improve, and how do we prioritize our work going forward into the future. So thank you to everyone who has come out to be with us today. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with our presentation. I just would like to take a few moments to introduce some of our speakers today that will be assisting with the presentation. So here's our short agenda. Work through introductions first. That's me. Our next speaker here with the City of Raleigh, Christina Bowman, if you want to just maybe say a few words about yourself and what you do here at the city. Christina is our ADA coordinator for the city. I'm very happy to have her with us today. And so I'll just, if you want to take a few moments to just walk us through what your role is here at the city and how it relates to what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Christina Bowman. I'm the ADA coordinator for the City of Raleigh. I've been here for about 2 years, and I am your point person. Anyone in the community, visitor, resident, if you work here, you have any questions, concerns, you can always reach out to me. I believe my contact information will be at the end of the presentation, but I'm here as a resource to you. If you have any grievances, any issues at all, please contact me anytime. Okay. Thank
you. All right. Thank you, Christina. Our next presenter is Steve Hens. Steve is a member of Cole & Associates and is one of their accessibility project managers that is working with myself to help deliver this ADA transition plan for the city, and will be assisting us today. And finally, Nick DeYoung, hope I got that right, will be also helping us present today. He is also with Cole & Associates and has been on our team for several months as we've worked through this process, and will be also presenting today. And so with that, I'll ask Nick to come up and walk us through the presentation about our ADA self-evaluation and what that looks like as we move forward through the transition plan, and what the steps are that we'll be taking from this point forward as we move through public engagement and actually into implementation in the coming months. So Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is our Raleigh Self-Evaluation and ADA Transition Plan public outreach meeting. I want to thank you all for coming out today. We're going to be going over a brief overview of our self-evaluation findings and how that will be implemented into our ADA transition plan. We hope you find this information helpful, because we do need your help and involvement to help develop further with the community with the ADA transition plan. So first, we're going to go over a quick overview of what a self-evaluation has in its agenda. And the policies of review. It is a review over the city's policies, review of their services, communication programs, facilities, and specifically for, in our sake, pedestrian access, including sidewalks, curb ramps, transit stops, and traffic signals. The purpose of our self-evaluation is to identify barriers of access for individuals with disabilities, to help prioritize those barriers and how we can immediately render those for the public. This self-evaluation process will then be developed into a transition plan, a living document that has helped to develop the responsible parties involved to eliminate those barriers, to prioritize a schedule to eliminate those barriers as well, and then to give an estimate of cost for the removal of those said barriers for individuals with disabilities. So a quick understanding of the history of the ADA. The Architectural Barriers Act of 1968. This was the first law developed by the United States government that helped eliminate barriers in all federal buildings. This was a great step forward to have inclusion for individuals with disabilities, but with that was a smaller scope. It only involved federal buildings themselves. From there, the development of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 came into play, and specifically in our state was Section 504. This was an act to help inclusion of accessibility for all rehabilitation programs funded by the federal government in all federal programs that were also granted by the federal government as well. Around this time, the civil rights movement was also involved, and then eventually in the development that came to the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, that came into play in 1990. This was a civil rights law that prohibited all discriminations for individuals with disabilities. As we know now, after 35 years, this also helped implement a self-evaluation and transition plan for all governments and businesses of 50 or more people. This was beginning steps and is still being developed today for many areas around the country. But Raleigh today is now taking the steps forward to help implement that transition plan. Back in 2011, the U.S. Access Board granted the Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines, as we know now as PROAG. There was a beginning steps in 2011 and then was reviewed in 2013. As of 2023, there was a final ruling of PROAG, which is now the federal guidelines for accessibility rights, and was now implemented in regulations in July 3rd of 2024. Along with the Americans with Disabilities Act, there were many titles that were involved for all areas of accessibility. From Title I, that involves employment, Title II, which is what we will be involved with today, that involved public entities and state and local governments. Our Title III of public accommodations and private entities. Title IV that began with telecommunications, and then Title V, which was under miscellaneous. But again, we're here to talk about our Title II. So the purpose of this public outreach meeting. People in the highest priorities are the understanding that individuals within the community will have a better understanding of the highest priorities of what will be hindering them to have access to public entities or public buildings, facilities, sidewalks, etc. We want to understand from the community where we can improve. You all have a better understanding of where those areas of expertise will be. We understand from the government side what we're missing, areas that we need to go and have an improvement. And we also need to identify what agencies will be included in those removal of barriers. In our remaining steps going forward, this is the beginning of our public outreach. This was going to be the first period of having the community have an involvement with the transition plan. We have a public comment period, which will be going on for the next month. So till January 6th is where we're going to have our surveys out for the public to have comments. This will then help us have a prioritization list of barriers of access that need to be eliminated, and we will have a timeline and cost-efficient schedule for those eliminations of barriers. This will then be a development of our implementation plan, which will then help us create a draft ADA transition plan for development for review, which will then be adopted as the official Raleigh ADA transition plan. So to begin with our self-evaluations of the public right-of-way and our approach to evaluating those public right-of-way involvement. So for our process of going through the self-evaluation, we had a GIS, Geographical Information System. This was used for our mapping for integration with the city's current database, and that was used for our tablets and data collection. We'll go into further details in a minute of how we went and collected curb ramps and sidewalks as well. First, in our technology based, we used tough pads, which were mobile computer systems that were integrated with our geographical information system. They were able to use this function to place points for curb ramps, for sidewalks within the city that would help to integrate the information that we could give an assessment of those different facilities. We also used our ULIP system, which was our ultralight inertial profiler, which was attached to a Segway. This gave us an ability to go over our sidewalks. That's then evaluated its width, different deviations within the sidewalk. It also helped to identify different keystrokes within the ULIP system of different obstructions that we would come across, whether that be vegetation, whether that be utilities that need to be removed, driveways that were inaccessible, thus forth. On our photos up here on our left, we have a picture of our tough pads that we used out in the field. And on the right, we have one of our operators that are on our ULIP system that's getting onto our Segway. From those mapping systems, we were able to integrate through the GIS system our information throughout the city. As you see on our photo to the right, we have our different districts within Raleigh that we help to mitigate or have an understanding of where these issues would be falling throughout the city. This would give a better planning and implementation process for the city of Raleigh, and also for a full rounding of understanding of what was mitigated already, forward step processes for the city to help involve with eliminating those barriers of accessibility. From all the information that we gathered through our ULIP system, through our mapping system as well, this is where we begin our prioritization method. This is an implementation of public involvement from our surveys through all of you and your communities, as well as understanding the different barriers that are out there, including different feature types, such as our curb ramps, our sidewalk, pedestrian signals. But then also with that, that's how we create our active rankings, our activity ranking system. This is going to be an understanding of how close certain features are to schools, to government buildings, to shopping areas, high density housing, things within the community that will bring people together, and how they get to that access to those facilities. Along with that, we'll have our compliance severity scoring. That's the overall compliance of those features, of your sidewalks, of your curb ramps. Those will be given a score of how compliant those assets are, and then combined we'll create a barrier ranking. This will help us prioritize the highest ranking features that we need to eliminate first. We'll go on to the self-evaluation of the public right-of-way and our findings of what we've had during our discovery. During our time in the streets of Raleigh, we had evaluated 19,098 curb ramps and refuge islands. From those as well, we have 14,550 curb ramps and refuge islands that will begin to still be in our inventory from that time on our findings as well. We had 790 missing curb ramps at different locations that we identified needs for having a curb ramp. From our sidewalk and our ULIP information, we had 1,137.3 miles of sidewalk that were evaluated. And from that evaluation, we also identified 132.9 missing sidewalk panels or gaps in service where they needed access. Yes, sir. Oh, hold on, sir. We're going to give you a microphone so that everyone can hear you too.
I'm Robert Parrish. I'm a Vice Chair-elect of the Raleigh Commission on Disabilities. Now, when you say curb ramps, I think of those tactile domes, if you will, or surfaces. But what do you mean by curb ramp?
It's a great question, sir. So for everyone online as well, asking about the difference between a curb ramp if it's just involvement of tactile domes. The tactile domes you're talking about, or DWS systems, is also a part of the overall curb ramp. So we'd evaluate everything from the slope of the curb ramp, the direction of that ramp, if there is one of those tactile domes there as well. That's part of the overall scoring system. But yes, it's a great question. So we're going to go over some of our findings, which is a great lead into our discoveries here. So some of the common issues that we found when we were doing evaluations on our curb ramps were slopes that were at over their maximum allowed. We had detectable warning systems, or DWSs, that were causing different deviations in the sidewalk, were missing, or were not full width of the curb ramp for full access. We had changes in levels at gutter transitions from the road to the curb ramps themselves, and we also identified missing curb ramps that were required in different areas of the city. In our photo on the right, we have a curb ramp that's downtown and some of its local problems, from having broken panels, having some vertical deviations throughout the area. Some other common issues that we have with curb ramps: we're having too steep of slopes for our run slopes. This is identified in our photo on the left by the red arrow. That's where we would measure where those ramp run slopes would be. Other issues we have are missing ramps. That's identified in our photo on the right of a sidewalk that goes straight to a high curb ramp, or a high curb of 6 inches. Other issues we included were detectable warning systems here that weren't full width. That's highlighted in our photo on the left by the arrows and the red squares to identify those DWS systems. And also ramp cross slopes, which is identified in our photo on the right, of where we would measure those out of compliance slopes. For our sidewalk evaluation, common issues we came across were obstructions such as overgrowth of vegetation, utilities that were raised up to cause deviations. We had changes in levels that we call heaves. We had cross slope violations where they were out of compliance for their slopes. And we also had driveway slopes, whether that be personal homes or businesses, that were also out of compliance. Some obstructions photos that we have on the left is a utility pole that's within the sidewalk causing a clear width issue, along with overgrowth of vegetation causing someone unable to go through with a wheelchair access. On the right, we have an example of a heave due to overgrowth of trees, or vice versa, just older sidewalk that has been overgrown. Some other issues we have are cross slopes. That's identified in our left photo with the arrow, identifying that too far of a slope can cause someone to tilt over using wheelchair access, along with the driveway cross slopes, which also the pedestrian right-of-way. So from those findings, for total cost of our discoveries, we discovered that sidewalk in our ULIP collection data, we had a total cost of $314,679,462 for total repairs to all sidewalk that we had evaluated thus far. $314,679,462. For our sidewalk that was missing, we had an estimate cost of $46,619,644. For our buried sidewalk, the total cost to unearth those sidewalks would be $4,744,220. For our narrow sidewalks, we had $296,865 to get those to compliance for full width. From our curb ramps, our total cost would be $43,783,850. And then for our refuge islands, we also had a total cost of $1,058,600. This is giving us a grand total to come up to compliance for all evaluated features of $411,182,641. Now, obviously, this is a large cost to the city, and this is not going to be something that can be changed overnight. This is the development of a transition plan, which will be an implementation to resolve these issues over a set amount of time. I wanted to talk about the opportunity for you all to review our summary of findings in greater detail within our summary of findings document, which is here on the link on this webpage. We have copies online for you to review. We also can print out versions for you as well. From here, you'll be able to identify more in-depth findings that we have throughout the city. Total cost, our evaluations of different heaves, different driveway lengths, and overall total understanding of our summary of findings that we had today in more in depth. From our community input survey, which is where we're starting here today, we want to have your input, so we have just created a public input survey, which is this link here today. We also have copies on our back left over here which is being identified by Ben as well for you to hand out today. The purpose of our community input survey is we want to gather information from the community that is being impacted the most by this. We need your comments and your needs to help identify those barriers to access that maybe the city hasn't gotten to evaluate yet. You're going to know these better than anyone else. The process will be completely anonymous online, and this data is going to be used to prioritize the accessibility throughout the city. Our public meeting today is the start of that on December 13th, 2025. And if any additional resources are needed or any questions, we have a link here to Raleigh's accessibility page as well. For our next steps, we will have the public involvement online until January 17th of this following year. This transition plan will then be updated to include the public involvement. It'll have a cost and timeline associated with the responsible parties of these barriers of removal. And with that, we have Christina Bowman's, the ADA coordinator's phone number and email for any additional questions. She will be your first point of contact to help you identify the different parties that will be involved to eliminate those barriers as well. And at this point, I would like to say thank you for coming out today, and I would like to open the floor for any questions that you guys may have. Thank you. Yeah, she's right here in the back. Steve, I got a question up here.
Thank you. Hi, William Smith. I'm with the city's Bike Ped Advisory Commission. So $411 million.
Correct.
I'm doing the math off the cuff. If the city spends $3 million a year, it'll take 20 years.
That is correct.
Yeah.
As I said, the transition plan itself is a living document. This is an understanding that this is going to be an ongoing process that is just help identify those barriers of removal. This total cost can't be snapped overnight, but just within 20 years, just you're going to need to do a whole new evaluation within 20 years of what you built even yesterday.
Is there a recognition that the city's getting a late start on this?
I don't want to say it's a late start. I think it's an understanding throughout the United States that many different municipalities have had opportunities to improve their accessibility, but taking the step forward for Raleigh is a active approach so that they can identify these barriers.
Yeah, I don't mean it as a criticism.
No,
but,
no.
I mean, the Rehab Act is 1973.
Right.
So a lot of this stuff wasn't done in the 70s or 80s or 90s. So
Correct.
it's inescapable that the city is about 30 years behind.
Yeah.
Considering, the circumstances of the first Rehab Act.
Right. In 1990, with the American Disabilities Act, it gave a 3-year timeline for them to create a self-evaluation and an active transition plan. And as we know, it's been 35 years, we're still having this development just throughout the country as well. And Raleigh has taken steps in the past to include accessibility throughout their timeline, but this is more of an active approach to how to identify those barriers and include them in their future projects as well.
Right.
So this is just a continuation of ongoing process for them to have
Great.
this accessibility.
I understand. So the transition plan, that is something that, to my way, to what I know, and I don't know a lot, but Barden versus Sacramento played a big role in cities across the country and states across the country deciding that it's time to do a transition plan.
There were many cases that I think brought up a lot of understanding that this is a need.
To my experience, one of the key issues in that case was the lack of an ADA coordinator in the city of Sacramento's transportation department. And I'm wondering if $411 million isn't enough money to decide that the city needs an ADA coordinator who solely does Title II issues.
So you're saying you don't believe that it's enough of a cost for an additional?
I'm just wondering if that discussion is taking place. If it's a big job and it's been put off for decades and it's a huge amount of money. I'm wondering if we're having the discussion about whether there needs to be a person in the Department of Transportation whose sole job is fostering this transition plan and making sure that it takes place.
Right,
Or if
and-
we're going to do that through contracts with consultants.
Yeah, and Nick, let me speak to William's question if I can. So within the Raleigh Department of Transportation, we do have a bike and ped coordinator. You may know her name's Barbara
I
Godwin.
know her very well. Yes.
So she would be very involved in this process to help us forecast and help us plan for how we ask for capital money, how we prioritize what we work on. Certainly, Christina will be involved as well from a citywide perspective from community engagement. But there's also an element of ownership from the Raleigh Department of Transportation on the transportation maintenance side, because we kind of view these assets as our assets, and we want to take ownership of them. And so between myself and a few project managers that I have, and we also have a data analyst in-house as well, to help us take the mapping resources that Nick mentioned and ensure that we're building our CIP ask and our business plan based upon trying to deliver what we feel like is possible year over year to help mitigate some of these issues. And so I do think maybe in the future that working through adding a position could be a possibility, certainly. So it's something that we can talk about and see what that looks like in the future. But to get us started, we do have a very qualified project management team along with a data analyst and a GIS analyst. And so I will say we're set up and ready to go to start delivering on this plan. And so once we start to prioritize and get the most severe cases lined up in year one, we'll write those contracts and start to deliver. And then the process will, basically reiterate year over year. And so we'll take that information, we'll update the public-facing GIS maps and say, hey, we've updated, these issues in the city, or we've rebuilt curb ramps, or we've, fixed these sidewalks. And so now we're moving to the next phase and so one other thing that I will touch on is $411 million. It's an astronomical number for this city, for any city really. And one thing that I will say is it's not just the money that we put up on the maintenance side. There are other capital projects in the city, such as Barwell Road, those types of projects where we may have existing sidewalks, and so those projects will take care of upgrading or replacing sidewalks as well. So we're going to look for opportunities to leverage those projects and have those assets updated as part of maybe a capital project. And so it will be a lot of moving pieces. And so I think your point is well taken that, maybe there should be somebody to work directly with Christina within RDOT. So thank you for that question.
Hey, I appreciate your answer, and I don't mean to insinuate that you're going about things the wrong way, and I don't mean to hold you responsible for decisions that were made 20 years ago. But I also, I think some of those things need to be reiterated every once in a while, that we are behind here, and that it's such a large amount of money that it really needs extra. You guys are great. The city of Raleigh has been wonderful since I've been here. I've been really happy with the sense of urgency that the city's showing about this. Anyway, while I have the mic, I have one other point to make. I've run into a lot of signs, road signs, that, because of the nature of the sign, jut out into the sidewalk, sometimes as far as 2 feet. They're in the green space between the road and the sidewalk. So a person using a cane is not going to be able to detect that obstacle at eye level. And so you have people who run into these signs all the time.
Yes.
And that's another, I didn't hear you mention that, so I wanted to point that out.
So during the discussion of the ULIP system that we were talking about, during this runs during the sidewalk evaluations, they have keystrokes that they can identify different obstructions. One of those being signs that would be hanging into the right of way that's less than 6 foot or causing a clear width issue, such as what you're talking about as well. So those are all marked within our maps and giving the corridors a scoring system of how often those would happen and then have an identified mark of where they are within the city.
Great, thank you.
William, just a point of clarification. When you mean signs, are you speaking of permanently mounted signs? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes. This is Robert Parrish, so I'm going to follow William with several questions. $411 million. You know, several of us are a part of various committees like the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, the Accessible Pedestrian Signals, committees like that. You know, how quickly, well, and we've talked about these kind of things. So first thing I want to know is, are you going to interact with existing committees that are already addressing these problems? And what does it look like?
So reaching out to the community as well is a huge involvement. This is part of our public outreach program itself. So we want to have as much involvement as we possibly can. We want to hear the efforts being made previously as well as currently going on and the remediations to those barriers of access. So reaching out for you as well as talking with Christina will help us as the city get those programs on the severity scoring list and help us understand what is going to be the highest activity level that we need to eliminate first. So having any of those problems that you're talking about, bus stops that are dropping off the wrong place, if that's an access from the sidewalk to those bus pads as well, those need to be immediately communicated to the city so that we can have those as a high ranking value so that we can identify those problems first.
So you're going to be interacting with the various committees that are already in place?
Yes.
Okay. I also know that these projects take years. Some of these projects have been mentioned, they're not complete because the money is not there. So with that $411 million, will these projects be completed more quickly?
So there's funding that the city is looking into accessing as well for specifically accessible projects alone, but also to how to tie in this information to existing projects or ongoing projects that are planned for the future as well. So this funding as well as the city's budgeting is going to be involved with all of this as well.
And that funding's guaranteed?
What's that, Ben? Say.
So one thing I'll say about funding is I think everyone is probably aware that funding has to be approved by City Council. And here at the Raleigh Department of Transportation, it is our goal to communicate up through the city manager's office to let them know we have $411 million worth of work that needs to be done in the city. And certainly accessibility is a big priority in our strategic plan. And so it's our hope that sharing this information and being active with the various committees like yourself and the BPAC and others, Transportation and Transit, to keep this information at the forefront and to let as many people know as we can that we need more funding to work on these items.
All right, because I hear the figure, but there are no guarantees that we're going to have this funding. I hope that we do get it, but we also know that it's slow in coming. But you know, that's but it's a great hope to aim for accessible, you know, leeway for us who are disabled. You may not have thought about this, but you know, there's a lot of construction going on in Raleigh right now. I call it destruction, but a lot of construction. Has anyone ever thought about audible signals? You know, they put these, what do they call them?
Chirps.
They put these, I can't think of the name, but they're orange and white. They signal that there's construction going on. Some of these do have audible signals to warn a person that there's construction ahead. So I would urge you to look into that as far as accessibility safety. I know that the Government Head School has them. They've had them up to tell people who are walking down sidewalks that there's construction ahead, because you know some of us wouldn't see them.
Absolutely. There is part of the pedestrian access route that has involvement of putting up signs before you reach those construction zones to
Right.
give you an accessible pathway around that. And part of that is putting up signage, as you're speaking of.
But it needs to be audible.
Say there are audible signs out there
Right.
as well, but there are signage that will be put up in place before construction sites. Looking into the audible situation, there are other signages that we could look into within the city to have that as a benefit before you go down that street or down that road, that you'll be, before you get to that point, to take another route around there.
Okay, and one final question. Have you thought about, and I sent this to is it Mr. Daniels that I sent it to? There's something called tactile street crossings. They have them in Europe. They have them, I know, in the state of Michigan. Has your committee looked into that as a part of the project?
I believe that's something that we can all look into. There's something that we can talk with Christina as well, giving any type of solution there for crossing and safely. If we can see if that's an opportunity that the city would take on to use for a crossing district, or crosswalks, I should say. But
Right. Yeah, they're tactile, and it's an extra measure of safety and accessibility for everyone.
And that's a great opportunity that the city can look into now that you're bringing up that subject. That's something that we can work in involvement with you as well, so that we can have a little more in-depth understanding of what that would look like with the city of Raleigh.
All right, thank you.
Nick, can I add just one more
Yeah.
point to that? The team that manages traffic signals and pavement markings in the city recently did a presentation for the Transportation and Transit Committee and highlighted the need for additional funding for pavement markings and things like tactile crossings. So we're certainly communicating that to city leadership, and it's our distinct hope that we will get some funding to start implementing a greater level of service when it comes to crosswalk markings and potentially things like tactile crossings. So thank you for that question.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Quan Yu. I'm with a community partner. I have a few questions in regards to the presentations. I'll work it backwards so it's a lot easier to navigate for you all. If you can go back one slide for me. So the public involvement here, it says online survey and presentation. I'm assuming that means in-person presentation, just like today. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I just walk in here doing a sign-up sheet. This is really more like a suggestions. If you don't mind, next time when you have these kind of in-person, whether it's ADA or anything else, kind of maybe just ask. They have a little column on the ask how people get to the public presentation on that day, because a lot of us, well, most of us probably get here by car, but not all of us are. For example, I'm not today, and really just a way to gauge how effective your public engagement is. If you're doing ADA presentation, most people drove here, probably kind of missed the point a little bit here, right? A few slides back, going back to the finding with the heave and also the driveway slope. Yeah, somewhere over here. It's fine. Earlier I hear you talking about working with the committee, BPAS committee, and then project management about doing these findings. Is there any way for public to also put direct input on a priority. For example, I know Raleigh just moved into the new Ask Raleigh. Says, can this be one of the things that us regular people can report? The heave, the obstructions, the sideways slope, these kind of things?
Absolutely, yes. So that kind of communication is key for what we're looking for. These kind of identifications of different barriers out there in the public is where we need to have you report those types of information to Christina. This will then help us deviate those problems to different sectors of the city or who will be involved with that as well. So having those identification barriers is a great opportunity for you and the public to all come together to help us identify those barriers to access.
All right, I appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead, yes.
This is Christina. I did want to also point out, so the survey that we've referenced a few times is out and available online. We've also got some printed copies here. But I also wanted to mention that the city has rolled out a new customer experience portal called Ask Raleigh, if you're familiar. Okay, great, because I know it's still a bit new. And so that's also another, once the survey has closed, those are other ways in which you can report any other issues like that. And we are working right now to get one more specific to ADA. So that's not quite fully rolled out yet. That's hopefully coming in a few months, but I think still you would be able to go in and find a way to input that as another means as we carry forward.
I appreciate it. Thank you. One,
Here.
Is the app accessible? I mean, can I use it? I have a smartphone, right? But I don't see well enough to do much with it. And I use it as a magnifier more than anything in that regard, as a tool. So I don't have Ask Raleigh on my phone. And I'm not certain, maybe I don't have any experience, so I'm just guessing, but I feel like maybe if I tried to use my phone to use Ask Raleigh, I would fail. And I'm just wondering if that has been assessed, and how are we making people? Because I know, like, every time somebody uses it, it creates a ticket, and that's important, especially when you've got so many individual locations, increments. So that accessibility to Ask Raleigh for people with vision impairments in particular, is that something that is easily accessible, do you know?
This is Christina speaking. That is something that we can sit down and look at more in depth. I will say during the development and beta testing phase, they did ask that we reach out to the Raleigh Commission for Persons with Disabilities for volunteers to get in the system and check it out. And so I don't know that anyone volunteered to do that, but we did attempt to get some folks to look at that before it was fully rolled out and launched. But I think that there's still opportunities to look at. And so that's something you and I can work on together perhaps at some point offline. Okay, yay. Thank you, Bill.
And I'm volunteering Robert Parrish and Mark T. too.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Just one more question. 2 slides back, actually. When I go back to the finding. Yeah, right. Yep, right there. Yep, this one right here. So the detected warning, that curve right there represents 2 kind of problem. One is on screen, one is not. One is that little bump right there to separate the 2 directions. A lot of time, you did cover this earlier, where when those ramp is not ADA with compliance, it creates a tremendous problem. I've actually seen a person roll over and then fell right down to the road because of that. That's number 1. Number 2, with the presence of that, it's a different issue. A lot of time, a lot of these street corner curb ramp is actually, instead of separating into 2 street is actually directly go into the street corner, where a person like us is totally fine, but if you're on a mobility device, you're quite literally dumping a person in the middle of a traffic. I wonder if you can also look in a way to address those as well.
So the question is, having a difference between, these are 2 directional ramps for the type of ramp that would be evaluated here. You're talking about a diagonal ramp. So during our evaluation process, as well as the transition plan, we encourage all designs going forward to stay away at least to have the last possible chance to have a directional ramp. A diagonal ramp. We prefer to have 2 directional ramps to give you a specific direction of path of travel over the street as well. But then in certain situations, that's whether it be lack of right-of-way, utility, that it cannot be moved. That's the last case scenarios to have those diagonals that will go out to the street. But even now, new designs that create a clear path or a clear space at the bottom of those ramps to avoid those situations where someone could potentially get run up, like knocked off of their wheelchair going into the street.
I appreciate that. Just to follow up, I wonder if there's some kind of code that can build into it. If that is the last resort, there's no one else, there's no other way for the developer to comply other than having those diagonal. Can you perhaps highly encourage them to do some sort of curb bump out, so at least give the pedestrian, give the accessible user some space to land before they cross the street?
Absolutely. That's part of the typical designs of a diagonal now moving forward to involve those clear space areas. And that's part of PROAG. The final rule is the understanding of that development at the front, at the gutter to the road, is that also be an accessible landing before you reach into that road. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name is Mark Teague. I have a couple of questions and a comment. First off, was I correct where you said to expand the sidewalks is only $300,000 for the improvements?
No, sir. No, that was said. For the expansion of narrow sidewalk,
Yes.
so that's only identifying just narrow sidewalk that was within inside of our evaluation process, which we did come out with $296,000 as that comes to narrow sidewalk alone, which is still uncompliant sidewalk.
Okay, like where I live at Six Forks, the sidewalk is 4 feet. Are you talking about expanding it to the compliant of 6 feet?
So narrow sidewalk would involve any sidewalk narrower than 4 foot. So a 3 foot sidewalk to 4 foot sidewalk, exactly. 4 foot
Okay.
still is the absolute minimum, but always we encourage individuals that are going to build new sidewalks to go to 5 foot.
Okay. Additionally, do we have a number count of how many intersections are not ADA compliant?
That is part of the report within the mapping system as well. And the prioritization list will help identify those corridors that involve those intersections and give a almost heat map of where the highest severities will be at.
Will there be like an ongoing progress report, like the new meter system that shows the progress of these improvements?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is part of our GIS system and part of our mapping system as well, is to help track remediations that are being made forward for the future so that we can keep track of those. And then having that as a living document will show proof of those improvements alongside the needed access for different barriers to be removed.
Okay. My final comment. Please, when you out resources for surveys, the high contrast is considered. I have low vision, and it's very difficult when surveys are sent out for me to be able to complete them easily. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is Christina speaking. Mark, I know you shared that with me previously, and I believe the surveys are coming out through the platform, if that's the right word we use for public input. So I've spoken with the communications analyst who sent this recent one out about the concern around difficulties with color contrast and whatnot, and so he's going to be reaching out to that vendor to see what they can do, if anything. So I did bring that to his attention. I want to let you know he's looking into it. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name's Kathleen Christie, and I have a question. It's rather technical. I want to know, how do you go about deciding how long it takes a person to cross a street? Because a lot of the times that I've had to cross the streets, I'm still walking and the timer has expired. And, you know, is it the same amount of time for a 2-lane road versus a 4-lane road or a 6-lane road? And because, you know, I'm taking my life in my own hands when I've got to cross anything more than 3 lanes, and there's not a stopping medium in the middle of the road with a push button. And how often do you check the maintenance of the push buttons? Because some of them don't work.
It's a great question. Just to reiterate, we're discussing what the standard timing is for crossing a road, and also push buttons that have been not working. Basically, that's where you're trying to go with. Yeah, so there is a standard for design on length of road or length of lanes that you'll be passing over to get to the next spot safely, and there's a lot amount of time for that as well. During your studies as well, we can have a study for traffic that would involve understanding maybe there's a longer lane. If it expands into a turning lane, that it can be increased as well. But that, again, can be addressed through compliance reports or through a grievance procedure that you would report saying that this road needs to have longer timing as well, and that can be looked into by the city. For the push buttons themselves and the operational factor of those are part of the evaluation as well, that moving forward, those can be looked into. But again, for our purpose, we've evaluated our curb ramps and our sidewalks. The push buttons are at another facility as well that will be looked into.
A lot quicker than my gate when we're crossing the streets, you know? Why, if you've got somebody doing construction on a curb or removing a tree, and they're using little bobcats and stuff, and they're crushing and use the mic so that we can capture that one. Okay. When you've got people doing construction like tree removal in the older neighborhoods, and they've got bobcats or other mechanical devices to help move the trees, or the tree limbs, trunks, whatever, and they go over curbing and they unsettle it, I guess what you'd call it, and they leave the upheavals and stuff. Why aren't they being held responsible for fixing it? And, you know, a before picture and an after picture. Because I was recently staying in the city, and it was a county property, but they did do that. They upheaved it very high, and I wasn't able to go over it with my rollator. And just other people with baby strollers and stuff have a hard time getting over this stuff. It's not only electric wheelchairs. It impacts the whole walking pedestrian movement. And they just said, well, it's a city of Raleigh curb, so we don't, it's up to Raleigh to fix it. I'm like, well, the county just made the mess, and other construction sites around. They should be responsible for putting it back in the same condition that they found it in.
Yes, and you're absolutely correct, and I will speak to the permit and inspection side. We work closely with urban forestry when it comes to tree removals. There is a permitting process that is supposed to be followed when trees, especially street trees, are removed in the city. And so when the process is followed, it will include a follow-up inspection by both urban forestry and transportation to ensure that that damage is not happening. The unfortunate circumstance that we often run into is people hire their own tree companies, they don't communicate with the city. And so unless we happen to drive up on it and see the damage occurring, we often can't hold anybody responsible. And so at that point, from a maintenance standpoint, we have to put it on our list and then send our crews out to fix it. So I will say, if you run into those things, please let us know, and we'll certainly get it on our list to be investigated and repaired. But we can't stress enough that if companies, especially tree removal companies or other construction firms, if they can just follow the permit and inspection process, it would solve a lot of these problems that we seem to experience. But thank you for addressing that.
Any other questions?
Thanks. I grew up in this pedestrian advocacy role with the 3 E's, which was education, engineering, and enforcement. And I think that a good part of the legacy issues in the city are enforcement issues. People not driving properly is one of those issues, but another one is construction. To me, the markings on a curb ramp, the crosswalk markings are every bit as important as the yellow lines down the middle of the road. And I'm wondering if you have any plans to talk with law enforcement about how they see the right-of-way, so that when they come across somebody who's put a barricade over a curb ramp at the corner where their construction site is, I mean, that's to me something that a law enforcement officer should drive by and see and say that's a safety issue just as much as somebody crossing the yellow line is a safety issue in the right-of-way. And can we ask law enforcement to start generating those messages, you know, like when they come across a barricade or something that's being done improperly or illegally even, can they cite them, make a phone call, get in touch with somebody in the city who can threaten or, you know, call the permit up and say, look, if you have a permit to do this, you have to follow the law. If you're not going to follow the law, we're going to pull your permit. I run into that several times walking around the city where you know, North Hills, for example. And, you know, you can make a call to the city and they'll straighten it out pretty quick. But if I don't go there for 3 or 4 days, this is something that sits there and doesn't get called in, but, you know, dozens of times law enforcement drives right by it and doesn't see it. So I'm wondering, you know, is there an education aspect to this transition plan, and are we going to engage law enforcement in the enforcement part of Title II?
So thank you, William, for the question. One thing that I will say when it comes to issues such as the one that you mentioned where we may have a barricade or something across the sidewalk, first and foremost, whenever we have construction in the city, those contractors are required to submit a pedestrian detour. And so we do evaluate those plans, and through our plan review staff and our inspection staff, we work with those contractors to see that those things are implemented. Now again, we have contractors that take liberty and do things on their own without contacting the city. And that's the reality that we live in. We try to circulate our inspection staff around the city, and they have all been empowered by myself to point out issues or stop and talk to somebody if they see a traffic control or a pedestrian issue in the city. And so when we see those issues, we do have the power to cite, albeit our power is very limited. A $100 fine is a very small fine for a construction company that makes millions of dollars potentially. And so to your question about engaging with the police department, we do engage with the police department on a variety of sidewalk-related issues, especially when it comes to people parking on the sidewalk continually, chronic blocked sidewalks, those types of things. Raleigh Police does have community police officers, and so we do work closely with their community police officers in each district to address some of these ongoing sidewalk issues where if we can't get a car moved, if we can't get a dumpster moved or anything that might be blocking the sidewalk, police will actually send an officer out there and speak with the person or the property owner to try and get some action before they get to enforcement. So we do work with the police department in the individual districts, and we'll continue to do that. And we can certainly have the conversation about a stop and talk, but right now I don't know that they would specifically agree to that. But it's an interesting point, and it's always trying to do better, right? So certainly it's worth a conversation with the police department to see what resources they could provide to that end.
I'm going to run a mic to you, sir.
Robert Parrish, once more. This is indirectly related to your purview today, this question I'm about to ask you, but some of us have problems with scooters in the middle of the sidewalks. Yes, amen. And I just want to know, could you possibly address, and I think, I will say that I think the city has done a good job in addressing the problem. There are less scooters left in the middle of the sidewalks now. I notice they're parked on the side now. I do wonder why aren't there places where these scooters could be stored, just like the bicycles are, but that's another story. And I noticed that there's the scooters are not speeding down the sidewalks like they used to. I mean, I've almost been hit 2 or 3 times by those things. My question, though, specifically is it within your purview to address the safety of sidewalks in regards to scooters being left right in the middle of them?
Yes, and it is, and thank you for that question. As you may be aware, the city recently released our active mobility plan and downtown mobility plan, and scooter usage was a big piece of those plans. And so one of the things that I'll speak to in my discussions with Barbara Godwin, who's our bike and ped program manager, is the addition of language in the scooter application that actually says, do not ride your scooter on the sidewalk.
Right.
To these folks that want to use scooters around the city. And so I think they've done a good job to try and message to a lot of the users that a sidewalk is not the place to ride one of these scooters. Now, to your question about where they're left around the city, it's my understanding that there are several scooter corrals that are in downtown. I happen to also know that there is a plan for a lot more to come to downtown. We're working with Barbara on that effort right now. So there will be a lot of places in downtown to store scooters so that they're hopefully not left on the sidewalk. But in the event that they are, it's my understanding that the user who logged in and paid to use that scooter will be charged a higher rate if they do not leave the scooter in one of those designated areas.
I think the fine is something like $15.
Yep.
And which to me is a slap on the wrist, but it's a start. I wish it were more like 30, personally, but it's a start. I know, and I understand the city wants to, keep the companies here. So it's a balancing act for the city. But I'm glad to hear that there are more places for these scooters to be stored, and that's great news.
Yes, thank you. Christina has something to add.
And just a little more to add, I think there might be, but don't quote me, but in addition to the fines that Ben mentioned, that after a certain amount, you get banned from using, you're disallowed from continuing to use. So there is that additional point in there. But I also did want to mention that my department is partnering with the Department of Transportation micromobility folks to do an educational awareness campaign, if you will, around how to be a respectful, responsible scooter rider, being mindful of sharing the sidewalks if you're on there or the roads with others, and properly parking it. So we are working on that now and hope to have that rolling out in the new year. We've also been in contact with the North Carolina State University to see if they can help push the messaging to their students. So I just wanted to let you know that is in the works because changing human behavior can be a challenge.
This is Mark Teague again. To continue with the conversations, so my question is, the sidewalks are designed for pedestrians. So how is it communicated to bikers and the people that have scooters that they're not allowed? There are people that do not rent scooters, so is it communicated with signage that sidewalks are designed only for pedestrians? Thank you.
I think the point that Christina just made is that we are working on a communications campaign to address that very thing, and that sidewalks are for pedestrians. And so I think they're due to roll that out in the new year. So yes, we are working on a communications campaign to address that very question. Education. I think the strategy is still ongoing, and so I'm not aware of what communication methods that they're considering. But signage could be one of the possible solutions to put out there to communicate to the public and to users of scooters that these sidewalks are for pedestrians only. I think that's certainly a valid method to look at.
Any other further questions?
Hi, William Smith. So I've talked to the city several different times, several different people, low key about the stripes for crossings in the city. You would think that a blind person wouldn't need stripes because they can't see them, but they're not really for a blind person in this instance. They're for the drivers. It marks an area that is intended for people to cross, and very, very few crossings in the city, statistically speaking, are actually marked. Some of them were marked, but the marks have worn off. Some of them, as far as I can tell, have never been marked. Six Forks Road, for example, you can go down one after another after another. These roads don't have the crosswalk marked. I know, like, for one crossing, it's probably not that expensive, but there's thousands of crossings in the city, and one of the estimates that was thrown at me in one meeting was $500,000 to stripe all of the crosswalks in the city. I know that was a spitball estimate, but this is what we're talking about. That, to me, is a really big education piece, because it's a reminder to a driver every time they get to one of these spots that area they're not supposed to be pulling into that area. They're supposed to leave it open. Now, whether or not they do that, 50-50 chance, I guess. But at least when there's a confrontation, when a pedestrian approaches and a person's sitting there, there's no ambiguity that they are not supposed to be there. And I think that's a really, really important incremental educational message. And I'm wondering if you've considered that for the transition plan, getting that done across the city over a period of time.
So, as we discussed earlier, that the pedestrian crosswalk is still part of the evaluation process as well, and identifying if those crosswalk markers are there, as well as if they're within compliance as well. So that will be an additional part of the pedestrian access route that will be part of the evaluation to then identify where those are needed at best. But again, if it's something that's impacting you directly, or you've noticed that is something that you can have a grievance procedure for, that you report back to us, that we can go out to have an evaluation of that if that's necessary right that minute as well.
Well, I have reported it, but it's a systemic issue. It's not a location specific. It's in hundreds of locations. So I would basically have to full time go around identifying intersections. I'm just wondering if there's a way, if you know that the infrastructure is deficient and you're trying to fulfill, another part of the corridor, like walking down Six Forks Road. Six Forks Road is a corridor for pedestrians and cyclists. Whether or not it's equipped properly for it, that it is. It's on it's a flat road. It's straight. You know, you can go for 2 or 3 miles down Six Forks. But at every intersection that, you know, you have people who are pulling out, trying to inch into Six Forks to make their turn. And they're distracted because they're watching cars come both ways. And if they're trying to take a right and they're looking to their left, they may not see somebody coming at them. Anyway, time after time after time, every time I walk down Six Forks, I have to walk behind somebody who's pulled up trying to get out. And it's one of the most dangerous things you can do, because you are obscured from the view of anybody taking a left coming the other way. So you get behind a vehicle and suddenly everything is, okay, we can go now. You've got somebody turning right and somebody turning left, and you're in the middle of the road, not at the crosswalk. And that's a design flaw. It's a legacy issue that, you know, nobody thought about 30 years ago, but now that we're asking people to walk and we're trying to educate the public, I think it's a really important thing for the city to consider doing, and I would really like to see that on the ADA transition plan.
Yeah, I'll just add to Nick's answer. One of the things that I know that our signs and markings program is working on is justifying more funding for markings across the city. We have a lot of legacy crossings. As you mentioned, a lot of these things were designed and built almost 30 years ago, and it's hard to think about. 30 years ago was the early 90s, right? And so a lot of these crossings were put in when many of the larger NCDOT roads in Raleigh were widened and expanded. And so I do know that our signs and markings program is working on justification for more funding for markings across the city, and that would include crosswalks, that would include marking new intersections, and then also our Vision Zero program is working on marking crosswalks that need those treatments as well. And then finally, the city is working through a Safe Streets for All grant program that will hopefully provide more funding for those types of installations as well. But to your point, a lot of these legacy intersections in the city create that situation where you may have to walk between cars, and longer term, the city will have to continue to evaluate the safety issue that creates. And so hopefully programs like Vision Zero, like Safe Streets for All, will be able to make improvements to select intersections where we may have those sight distance problems for people crossing. But I know that probably doesn't fully answer your question, but I hope some of the things we're doing will certainly help.
Are there any other questions at this time? Well, if there aren't, I want to appreciate everyone's time here on this Saturday, and greatly encourage every one of you to take the survey and to inform the public out there that the survey is also out there for them to take. But with that, I do appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your Saturday.
And just note, there are hard copies on the right here as you exit the room. So if you'd like, we do have some large print hard copies over there for folks to take with you as well. And so, and yes,
There are snacks.
Please take some snacks, drinks, coffee. We've got plenty of food. Christina, thank you for that. We've got QR code to also access the survey. And just to close us out, just want to say thank you again on behalf of the City of Raleigh. And thank you for coming out and sharing with us your concerns. It means a lot to me personally, because I want to try to make an impact and to make positive change. So thank you for your time today, and we appreciate you, and I hope everybody has a good Saturday. Thank you.